All eyes are on the crucial G20 summit this week. Several world leaders will gather and discuss key issues on the global economy. But the meet in New Delhi is not without its challenges. It will be a test for New Delhi as diplomacy gets underway. Ahead of the summit, the UK-India trade deal seems to be in jeopardy. A report in the UK media reveals that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has ruled out a quick fix trade deal with India. This means a deal before the leaders' summit is not possible. In fact, it is believed that a deal will only be reached in 2024 after both the nations go to polls. Moving on, Canada has announced a pause on trade talks with India. And this too just ahead of the G20 summit, which Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be attending. Just 3 months ago, both nations agreed to seal an initial agreement this year. However, no explanation has been given by the Canadian side on why the decision to halt talks has been taken. After all the ministerial meetings which have taken place this year in India, no joint statements have been issued as yet by nations. The reason being the differences over the war in Ukraine. You see, due to polarized views over the issue, no common language has been decided upon. And as we get you these updates, the fourth and final Sherpa meeting of the G20 summit is underway in the North Indian state of Haryana. It remains to be seen if there will be a joint declaration this time. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who will be representing the nation in G20 Leaders Summit, has categorically said that he will block the summit's final declaration if it does not reflect Russia's stand on Ukraine. Last year, Russia agreed to certain texts regarding the Ukraine conflict in the declaration at the Bali G20 summit. However, it withdrew from the same this year. And lastly, after much speculation, China has confirmed that Xi Jinping will not attend the summit and Premier Li Qiang will be there instead. Beijing has not given any reason behind this decision.
At the invitation of the Government of Republic of India, State Council Premier Li Qiang will attend the 18th summit of the leaders of the Group of 20 in New Delhi, India from September 9th to 10th.
Despite all these concerns, the summit holds immense significance for India. As the country chairs the meet during prevailing geopolitical tensions, India has made it clear that it seeks to be the voice of the global south, and Africa is its top priority. Prime Minister Modi has already initiated the process to grant the African Union full membership of the G20. India sees the G20 presidency as an opportunity to be a leader in tackling the challenges which the world is currently facing. And with the theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future, it seeks to instill sense of unanimity among all nations. And for more analysis, we are now being joined by Ashok Sajjanhar, the former Indian diplomat from New Delhi. Ambassador, thanks so much for joining us on WION at this hour.
Thank you very much, Purnima. Pleasure.
My first question, Rishi Sunak has ruled out a quick fix trade deal with India, making it impossible to get an agreement on the table over the line in time for this week's G20 in Delhi. What could be the reason behind this decision?
I think discussions have been going on, as you know, Purnima, for quite some time on this, and there have been certain hiccups, there have been certain issues, whether it is in terms of trade issues or movement of personnel, movement of labor from India to the United Kingdom. And so I think both sides have really been looking at resolving all these issues. As we know, globally also the world over, the economic situation is not the best. The world is still dealing with battling the impact of the COVID-19, the lingering impacts of the COVID-19, and also the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And I have very recently been in the United Kingdom, and I've seen that that the economy there is not in the best of health. So I think there would be such considerations that this might not be the most opportune time. And let us, give it a pause and, of course, continue the conversation, continue the negotiations. And soon enough, I'm sure both the sides will be able to come to some sort of agreement in which we can have the finalization of this deal.
Right, absolutely. Ambassador, you mentioned the economic scenario in a post-COVID world. Could that also be a factor in what's happened in Canada, the decision to halt trade talks with India?
I have not been following the India-Canada talks so very closely as I've been following this and India-EU negotiations. So possibly that could be one of the considerations, although, the Canadian economy is very, very different from the economy of the United Kingdom. It's a much larger country, much bigger natural resources, energy resources. So, what I was able to see in the United Kingdom when I moved around, that the prices of energy, fossil fuels, food items, they have increased very significantly. But I don't think that would have happened so much in Canada, because Canada itself is a large producer, both of energy, uranium, it has very significant quantities also, and also of agricultural products. So maybe reasons are similar or, somewhat different. But I'm sure there also both the sides are quite determined. I did hear the interview of Mr. Piyush Goyal some time ago, and he was quite aggressive on sealing a deal with Canada very soon.
Right. Ambassador, let's talk about the challenges at this summit. Now, Russia has come up with very strong words. Sergei Lavrov says that he will block any declaration unless it sticks to the language decided by them when it comes to the Ukraine war. How do you view this statement?
Yeah, I think they are putting the red lines there, and I heard also the statement by the Russian ambassador in Delhi, where he said that unless our views are reflected, we will not agree to any formulation on the Ukraine conflict. Now, we know that in Bali, it was what Prime Minister Modi had told President Putin in Samarkand. That proved to save the day, that this is not an era of war, and that was the formulation that was used. But then Russia and along with it China, both of them have gone out of this agreement, and they say even that is not acceptable because there are new issues that have been brought to their attention. I think both, all the G20 countries, and particularly the Indian negotiators, are working very avidly, very seriously on that. I think there is considerable optimism that we will be able to come to some sort of agreement on this particular issue. I think barring this one issue, there are two paragraphs that have been mentioned.
Right.
Paragraphs 3 and 4 as they appear in the Bali text. And on paragraph 4, there is agreement. Paragraph 3 is still outstanding. On all the most, or let me not put it all, on most of the other substantive issues, whether it is growth, whether it is development, whether it is reform of multilateralism, climate finance, women-led development, all these particular issues, there is, I could say, broad agreement, if not exactly consensus. And that is what the Sherpas are meeting, for the next 4 days, from yesterday till the 7th of September.
Right.
They are meeting in Haryana, so hopefully they'll be able to make
Right, Ambassador, before I let you go,
issues.
I have a final question. It has two parts. We know that Xi Jinping is not coming. Is that a disappointment? And secondly, are you expecting any big announcements from the G20 summit?
No, I'm expecting, to respond to your second question first, I'm expecting very significant announcements from G20. You would recall that Prime Minister Modi had said that we would want India's presidency to be action-oriented, dynamic, inclusive. So I think on all the issues that I have mentioned, the issues that really are afflicting the developing world, the global south, and India is championing their cause, whether it is debt issue, whether it is inflation in many countries, whether it is shortages of food, fertilizer, energy, whether it is supply chain disruption. These are all issues that affect particularly the developing countries. So I'm expecting significant announcements on all these issues because, as I said, there seems to be broad agreement amongst the 20 countries on these issues. Now, on the first question that you asked about Mr. Xi Jinping, you see, China has been negotiating in all the meetings that have taken place here, whether it is finance ministers and central bank governors, whether it is the Sherpas, foreign ministers, Shingang, when he was the foreign minister, he had come here for the meetings. So China has been very actively participating in all the deliberations. So irrespective of who represents the country, whether it is President Xi Jinping or it is the Premier Li Qiang.
Yeah.
I think his absence in substantive terms is not going to make any difference. In terms of optics, well, he's not there, President Putin is not there, many other leaders don't participate. And so I don't think in that sense also it's going to be make much of a difference, any significant difference.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on WION at this hour, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Purnima. Thank you. Pleasure.
Right, preparations are underway in full swing to host hundreds of delegates from the member nations, which will start arriving in the Indian capital for the G20 summit. WION Siddhant Sibal weighs in on what message India wants to deliver to the world at a time when geopolitical tensions are simmering. Here's our special report.
The stage is set. Delhi is decked up, and its roads are adorned with graffiti for the big occasion. Fountains, sculptures, illuminated G20 logos, all adding to the grandeur of the world-class event that will culminate on September 9th and 10th. Over the next weekend, New Delhi will become the epicenter of global diplomacy. Group of 20, or the G20, was formed as a group that seeks international economic cooperation. The member states represent around 85% of the global GDP and over 75% of the global trade. India, world's largest democracy and fifth biggest economy, with a population of 1.3 billion people, is walking the tightrope of diplomacy. New Delhi has been pushing for the global south to take center stage.
India has always, I think, given high importance to our partners in the global south. It is in that context that the Prime Minister reached out to leaders of the developing world. 125 countries joined us in what we call the Voice of Global South Summit.
India has chosen Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future, as a theme for its G20 presidency. Encompassing India's inclusive approach, New Delhi wants the forum to convince the world of its commitment to peace and non-aggression. In the present era, international bodies such as the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, even the United Nations Security Council are not as effective as they were once. With new power centers emerging, the G20 meeting comes at a time where New Delhi is pushing for multilateral diplomacy.
We have been very closely engaged with the Indian presidency and with the member countries on the agenda that India has proposed, have come out very strongly in support of the priorities of the Indian presidency.
Amid festering divisions over Russia-Ukraine war, the biggest challenge for New Delhi will be to convince the world leaders to put their differences aside and unite for a common cause for global welfare. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.